The psychology of cheating. Why do people cheat? Well, the answer is quite simple. Diversity, variety, miscellany, an assortment of different options available to us. So many to choose from, so many people. It's overwhelming. We can't possibly decide to commit to one person. Monogamy is so unnatural that we choose to employ the Brave New World method, effectively normalizing polygamy or polyamorous relations. Because it's easier, because it feels natural. Because if we have so many humans, so many potential partners to choose from, it makes the process all the more complex. It makes the expectation of staying with someone, with only one person, for the rest of your living days, till death do you part, all the more complicated, dubious in definition. It should seem reasonable with this explanation for us to be inclined towards polygamy, despite that approach being even more, being just as, if not more, complicated. So essentially, always having options deters us from committing, from dedication, from loyalty, from fidelity. Because this overwhelming selection of partners, of possible partners, and no one person is unique. It also should be considered that it's more a matter of feeling comfortable in this person's presence. The expectation that a relationship should be an enduring roller coaster of the expectation that a relationship should be the embodiment of a honeymoon. It should be that the entire relationship, from beginning to end, should be characterized by the honeymoon period, when the initial intrigue and mystery of getting to know this person. Which is precisely why I believe that distance is better than remaining in close contact. Do not aim to seek regular intimacy with your partner. It's healthy to keep a safe distance. It's healthy to take a break from the other, not to be in each other's presence constantly. That only expedites the dissolution. It only hastens the pace on the journey to divorcing. You lose interest in the person, one or both, and now you feel as if there's something to offer, because relationships are also a transaction. It's a mutual exchange between two parties where both are gaining from each other, not just one. Both parties seek to improve the other's well-being. Both parties are a veritable support system for the other. This is the purpose of a relationship, at least a long-term, serious commitment. And we have the option to be monogamous or polygamous. The lines are blurred with polygamy, with polyamory. Because how do we distinguish between these multiple partners? How do we establish some logic behind every partner being of equal value, of equal worth, being treated equally amongst the count? Surely there has to be favoritism, there has to be bias occurring in this endeavor. One partner will always be favored over the others. It will be a hierarchy. There will always be at least one partner that's favored by the other. And how would it begin when we consider two partners who are together, who have only been together with each other for a few years, 1 to 2 years, and then suddenly they communicate, they consult with each other, and they think that they consent to the possibility of including another person, and then possibly increasing. So they want to transition from monogamy to polyamory. I would suspect that the first two parties, the ones that were consulting fundamentally, they will always be the most attracted to each other. Everyone else that joined in later will be of lesser import. You should expect a relationship to have its pitfalls, to have arguments, to disagree. You ipso facto, by that very factor act, you should never seek a partner to whom you both agree on everything. That doesn't allow for improvement. That doesn't allow for development. So, simply, summarily, the psychology of cheating is rooted in the fact of diversity. What if we consider an alternate reality in which soulmates do exist? There is definitive, concrete evidence of the phenomenon of soulmates, that we are assigned at birth, as early as birth, with a partner already. It's just a matter of finding them. But would the law dictate, would we still have to put in the effort to find this person? Or eventually fate arranges a time, meeting, designation to meet this person? But the time varies. It may not be until you're middle-aged or elderly that you find this person, but ultimately you do, and it's written in the stars. Too mystical, too spiritual, I know. But would it make matters less complicated? Would it mitigate the risk of cheating? Again, I say spiritual. Mystical? Not really much of a scientific basis. As credible as astrology, but now if we consider a scientific basis, if we consider through the lens of neurology, if we consider by biopsychological factors, would there be a way, if our pheromones were more prominent, but then we would operate in the same manner as an animal? animals who rely solely on instinct. And it would not be dating, it would be mating. That would be the most apt term here, because we would be operating on the same level as animals. It's a mating process. But mating is for the purpose of reproduction. Whereas, as far as we know, us humans are the only species capable of sentience, and therefore are the only ones capable of abstract thought, being able to express love. Animals, they simply, we can define it as such, but they themselves cannot reason or define it through this filter of terms, given that their language is different. Which, speaking of, animals do in fact have respective languages. A pig, it maybe sounds to us, but it's a language, it's their form of communication. The disrespect when you say that animals can't talk. They can speak, they just don't speak our language. And as such, we don't speak their languages. And furthermore, it's simply a mockery when you bark, oink, moo, howl, growl, etc. Except growling and howling, I think, are languages that we can resonate with in terms of carnality, tracing back to the mating process, in which we do still incorporate, but it's only an addition to the relationship. What I find interesting about melanocytes and melanophores, which are responsible for the dark pigmentation for living organisms and plant life. Melanophores produce melanin for various plant life, such as fungi, whereas melanocytes are melanin cells that produce for living organisms, that produce for fauna and humans. And temperature has an effect on this. Of course, we know for humans, heat, aside from genetics, but heat, because it applies for everyone regardless of ethnicity, heat produces more melanin. It extracts melanin, is an agent, a causative agent for producing melanin. Those of Caucasian descent or with lighter complexions, still, when they tan, that's an increase in melanin production. For those of darker complexions, regarding their ethnicity, it's genetic. But I think that, but for animals, it operates differently. It's a different function. For example, there was a test conducted with a hare, a rabbit, a Himalayan rabbit. This test involved shaving a patch of skin on the back of the hare and applying an ice pack and allowing it to sit for a period of time, removing it. Its fur was no longer white. In that specific area, it was no longer white, but black. So the skin cells regenerated with darker fur, and it was no longer white in that specific area. So it was safe to conclude that lower temperatures have an effect on the production of melanin. But it varies, of course. It's not as simple to generalize, because For us, that's the opposite. We don't produce melanin from colder temperatures. It's from the sun. It's from ultraviolet rays. But for this Himalayan rabbit, for example, it's different. And because it lives in the tropical region, in the Himalayas, its fur is white. It develops lighter fur due to the heat, as opposed to if it were displaced, if it were relocated to a colder environment, then it would suddenly adapt and grow dark fur. Another thing I like to discuss concerning astrophysics, astronomy, cosmology, because that's strictly my jam. Anything that contends beyond this exosphere, beyond the exosphere of this planet, is my sexuality. Does anyone even really say that anymore? Blank is my sexuality, meaning how passionate I am about it, how much I love it. Knowledge is my sexuality. Seriously, quite frankly. I'm a blue stocking. Google it. Blue stocking. No spaces. Blue stocking. Blue stocking. For those of you who don't want to, for those who don't want to look it up, a blue stocking is a literary or intellectual woman. It's an archaic term. It's a literary term actually, but it was mainly used in the Victorian era to describe. It was a derogatory term, of course, back when women did not have rights. Were considered beneath men. So it was actually frowned upon for women to express an ardent interest in academics. If they would be reproved for reading extensively, instead of gossiping and talking about frivolous stuff, if they were caught, they would be reprimanded. It was just not. No, you couldn't be a smart woman. You couldn't be more educated than a man. But I'm a blue stocking. I'm a blue stocking. I cannot provide the etymology for that word. Why does the stocking have to be blue? Is it only one stocking as symbolism? And which leg does the woman wear it on? Just imagining a librarian from this era, if women were even allowed to be librarians or bookkeepers, they were just wearing a blue because also during this time, especially during the medieval era, during the Middle Ages, you would be pilloried, which is a form of punishment. They would use this apparatus, which is wooden. It actually also, I do believe, 1748, during the during the 18th century, a man by the name of Francis Grose devised a lexicon, a dictionary of words. Grose Dictionary of the Vulgar. And there was another term included in this dictionary called it was it was an alternative, a sobriquet, nickname for a pillory, which is wooden parentheses. They would call a pillory would also be called a wooden parentheses, and a prison would be called an iron parentheses, because if you know the arrangement of parentheses, two lateral curved lines vertically two vertical curved lines that form an enclosure for a word or phrase. And the way that the pillory was designed, you can Pillory, is it was designed. It's like a block of wood, and there were hinges on either side, able to open vertically, and the victim's head would be placed, neck would be perched in the middle. There was a spear, a circle carved there, and then on either side, laterally, two more circles carved for the wrists, and they would be confined there. And then people were free. This would usually be arranged in the public square. This would be arranged in the public setting to where passerbys would be allowed to embarrass or humiliate them. And it would be violent. Sometimes it would be a matter of public execution, but executed by the people, in which rocks will be thrown, heavier objects will be thrown that can cause injury, possibly death. Sometimes it was an alternative means of execution if someone really was accused of a serious crime and they didn't want to commence the standard execution with executioners, beheadings, guillotine. Usually it was just meant to humiliate. You can imagine having tomatoes thrown at this person while they're as a verb, pillory means to ridicule. And also you can imagine that usually the criminals, just like women would be burned at the stake, quite literally. It's not folklore, it's not myth, wives' tale. Women would actually be burned at the stake if they were accused of witchcraft, of sorcery. These practices do very much exist, and they very much are real. It's mainly conducted in various regions of Africa now, but with voodoo. But in Europe, the law was more in effect. If you were just doing certain things that would qualify as you possibly being, it alluded to you possibly being a witch, you would be, well, normally you should be expected to go on trial, and if you were accused, which by the people they determined, more often than not, you would be sentenced, you would be found guilty, and you die. And this applied exclusively for women, because only women could be witches. There's the warlock equivalent for men, but women typically is just, yet another way to discriminate and just think that. But if you think they're lesser than you, why would you consider them to be, you think this is a way for them to rebel against the patriarchy? Is that they're indulging in witchcraft because they want to exact revenge?